Thanks so much, Hamilton, for that introduction. Thank you also to CEDA and partners for the invitation to speak. Bernard Saltman, a partner with KPMG, based in Melbourne. My presentation today looks at ageing throughout Australia and particularly focused on South Australia. I suppose I have a very simple proposition. Ageing has had bad PR for many years. It ends in one direction. But I think there is an upside to ageing, and I think that the baby boomers are just the generation to redefine how life is lived beyond 60, beyond 65, beyond 70, beyond 80. And I think that the baby boomers will actually put a positive spin on it. This is a generation that is not going to go quietly off into old age. The first generation of retirees who will be educated, opinionated, articulate, literate, with time on their hands. This is a dangerous combination for those who ignore the baby boomers. They have redefined every stage of life as hippies, dinks, yuppies, sea changers, tree changers, and now they're lifestylers. We will see a range of micro segments emerge beyond the age of 60. Several years ago, there was a media campaign by one of the big banks talking about all of these benefits for the over 55s. I'm quite sure it must have been conceptualised by a 28-year-old who lumped everyone over the age of 55 into the same bucket. They're all almost dead. So you're 56, you're in a bucket with people who are aged 86. The baby boomers do not see it that way. They see it very differently. 55 to 64, part work, part retired. 64 to 75, active retiree. 75 to 80, perhaps. You still got some things that you might want to... 80 plus, perhaps. There is still a focus. There are still opportunities, still things to be done. We will be reinventing how life is lived beyond the age of 60. Let's have a look at some of the key numbers drawn from the census, of course. Absolutely critical. I don't care if it takes 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 6 months. We must fill out the census. If it is not measured, it does not exist. There is nothing that can compare with the census. In the 1990s, I did expert witness work, cross-examined by QCs. You cannot argue with the census. You can build any number of arguments around a survey. 2,000 people, should have been 4,000 people who conducted. What was the question? There are 4 million baby boomers on the Australian continent. We know exactly where they are. We know their faith. We know their work habits. We know their income can only be ascertained from a census. Do not let doubters, do not let hackers dissuade us from establishing the demographic truth in 2016. The advertisement is over. Let's move on to Australia, and in fact 24 million people on the Australian continent, around about 4 million people over the age of 65 today. It's around about 15% of the Australian population, 17% of the South Australian population. South Australia is the oldest mainland state, in fact. Not so much because of an influx of retirees as you get in Queensland, but from an exodus of 20-somethings and 30-somethings, which is a cultural issue that anyone in South Australia will talk about. Everyone knows someone in Melbourne, Sydney, London, Shanghai, Mumbai and Dubai, if you live in Adelaide or South Australia. But in fact, as bad off as we think we are, with 15% of the population over the age of 65, 17% in South Australia, go to Japan, 27%. If you want a fact-finding mission, an excuse to go around the planet and to actually see how these things are managed, go to Japan, 27%. Go to Italy, 23%. In fact, do not go to Nigeria or Zimbabwe, where barely 3% of the population is over 65. Having a population over 65 is a good issue to have. It shows that we are successful at life. I actually think there should be an issue called demographic diversity. Yes, gender diversity, ethnic diversity, sexual orientation diversity, all adds to the quality of life. Why not demographic diversity? You mean you have no one in your organisation over the age of 60? You have no one in your organisation who remembers or was in a management position at the December peak 1992 of the recession, the last great recession where you had 12% unemployment in this state. We think we're hardly done by now at 6%. It's a very different world. It's a different planet. Demographic diversity adds to the quality of life, I think. Let's have a look at some of the colour and movement, in fact, of the demographics of South Australia. If you go to Goolwa, of course, down on the south coast, near Victor Harbour, which features in my page 17 column in the Australian Today on this very subject, 47% of Goolwa's population is aged over 65. I cannot find another town on the Australian continent with a higher proportion. It is significant. You can only be definitive like that with a census. This is important, this is significant. That is important for policymakers to know. Then, of course, Encounter Bay, also down there, Victor Harbour, also down in that direction, and Drossen, of course, out on the Yorke Peninsula. Of course, all of these areas. Roxby Downs has no one over the age of 65. They do not have demographic diversity in Roxby Downs, and I think they are the lesser for it. I think that Goolwa needs youth and energy and vibrancy. I was in Invercargill, south part of South Island of New Zealand, about 4 years ago, which was an old community, loss of youth to Auckland. They actually changed a policy where they introduced fee-free tertiary education at the local polytechnic. 2,000 kids, 18-year-olds, arrived overnight into that town. The local mayor, Tim Shadbolt, said it was extraordinary. All of a sudden you had 18-year-olds walking down the main street, holding hands and kissing. And people were drawn out into public life. Demographic diversity. All young people, all old people, does not celebrate life. The presence of older people actually reminds young people of the circle of life. It encourages a culture of care. It also celebrates youth and beauty. Why would you not want those qualities in South Australia, in Goolwa, in Victor Harbour, in fact? The other point about ageing is that it has a big impact on the demand for disability services. And this does not mean that you need glasses or a hearing aid. This means you have mobility or communication problems. Again, a figure determined from the census. You go to, it's 5% across the Australian continent, but in Morphettville, it's 16%, 3 times the Australian average. In North Brighton, North Plympton, 15%. These are significant figures. It's only when you take this helicopter view you can actually see the significance of where you need to direct funding. These are the issues. There's another question on the census that I particularly like that is quite unique to Australia. We ask people their religious affiliation. 75% say that they are Presbyterian, Catholic, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever. 25% say they are nothing. But in fact, if you go to the Adelaide suburb of Newton, it's 85%. Extraordinarily devout people in Newton. I think it's a strong Italian community, of course, in the northeastern suburbs. Down at Sellex Beach is the most godless place in Adelaide. And in fact, I don't know what road, my geography of Adelaide is not strong enough. I don't know what road you would take to get from Sellex Beach to Newton, but clearly it is Adelaide's road to Damascus. You find salvation. There's a very interesting point. I have looked at faith, the belief. Do you actually believe in a God or not? Or are you an atheist, or whatever it is? And it's changed over time. And in fact, it changes through the age cycle. Never are you as godless as at the age of 23. You're young, you're fit, you're healthy, your parents are alive, your grandparents are alive. You are immortal. It is a cultural truth of the Australian people that comes out of the census. And then from 23, 24, there is a steady incline. You can actually see it. People get married, they have kids, their parents die, their grandparents die, and they're brought back, if you like, to think about those bigger picture issues. If there is a societal shift towards ageing, reflection, not necessarily traditional religion, should this be or could this be a cultural shift that will grip this nation, in fact, over the next decade or so? I actually think it will change. Go back to, in fact, 1936, 80 years ago, life expectancy in Australia was 63 years. You qualified for the age pension at 65 in 1936, so you dropped dead 2 years before you got a pension back in 1936. There were no teenagers. You're a child for 14 years, then you're an adult. At 50 you were old, and you dropped dead about 10 years later. That's the way it worked 80 years ago. 40 years later, life expectancy 71, 6 years in retirement. You could live your working life in Tea Tree Gully, and you could retire to Goolwa and live 6 years in retirement down the coast, up the coast, or whatever. The teenager makes their appearance. The segmentation of the life cycle starts the teenage years. Now move forward through to today. Life expectancy is now 82, 17 years in retirement. Although the most common age of retirement for an Australian today is not 65, it is 58. That is 24 years in retirement. What are you going to do? Sit at home and babysit the grandkids for 24 years? I'm sorry, baby boomers will not do that. They will work on beyond 58, beyond 60, beyond 65, beyond 70, working 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day per week. They'll introduce the concept of demographic diversity. You have no one in your organisation over the age of 60, in fact. This is the best time of life. Kids have left home, hopefully, paid off the mortgage, working 2 days a week, playing golf 2 days a week, doing some volunteering. It's a bit of this, it's a bit... I'm not retired. I have a portfolio lifestyle. There is a market to reinvent a term. The lifestyle stage of the life cycle, the portfolio stage of the life cycle, between 58 and 72. Whoever can conceptualise and tell the story, the narrative of life lived between 58 and 72 over the next decade and deliver product and services will prosper over that time frame. Baby boomers will not age as their parents aged. Baby boomers are the first generation to have seen their parents aged 80 and 90, and they are determined, I ain't doing that. I have a thing called a bucket list. I actually want to reinvent myself. I'm not actually happy in my relationship. I'm going to make another choice. These are brave, bold, different choices that are being made by baby boomers going forward. This idea of a generation reinventing how life is lived has occurred before, with Gen X and Gen Y extending the teenage phase in life. I think you're now a teenager through to the age of about 29. In fact, you live at home, cafes, bars, restaurants, toss in your job, head off to London. If that doesn't work out, you come back and live with mum and dad. You don't make commitments to job, mortgage, children, career until 30. This is a different concept to the concept that baby boomers pursued all those years ago. Just on this issue of baby boomers and superannuation, it's a very big topic at the moment. If you're born in 1946 as the first baby boomer ever invented, and you became an apprentice, let's just say a hairdresser or a boilermaker at the age of 15, you went into the workforce in 1961, you worked for 31 years before the superannuation guarantee program came into being. You paid taxes to the government of the day in the belief that in due course you would be supported, of course. It is the second wave of baby boomers, plus Generation X, plus Generation Y, that will have access to an entire lifetime of superannuation. First wave baby boomers got nothing. They also had the Vietnam War to contend with. Let's have a look at some of the key figures. Here is job growth in Australia in the 21st century. We have created 3.4 million jobs from May 2000 to May 2016. We have lost 327,000, many of them here in Adelaide, at Toyota and Mitsubishi or whatever it is. But that means we've created in net terms 3.1 million jobs. Where have those 3.1 million jobs in net terms been created on the Australian continent over the last 16 years? Why, that'd be in healthcare and social assistance. 700,000. 1 in 4 jobs in the 21st century in this nation been created in healthcare. And the oldest baby boomer is 70. He's got a long way to run yet, is my point. Healthcare, ageing, social assistance. job growth of the future, which state on the Australian continent should own that space? It is South Australia. That, to me, I think is the opportunity for this state. Let's have a look at some of the demographics for this state. Here is a 100-year perspective of population growth in South Australia. This shows the population growth between 55 and 64 over 1941 to 2000. What's that? 60 years. And you can see the back half, the next 40 years of the 21st century, in fact. You can see where we are in 2016, the 50-something and 60-something, early 60-something demographic and wave has washed through this state. Sea changes and tree changes have come and gone in this state. That's not where the future is. If I'm in business or I'm delivering a service, I want to know what's happening over the next 5 years or 10 years. Let's have a look at the 65 to 74 demographic, the active retirees. Here is the last 60 years up to 2001 in terms of net growth and loss across South Australia. Here is the next 40 years. That's where we are. Products and services aimed at 65 to 74-year-olds will grow at an extraordinary rate in this state over the next decade or so. Here is the 75 to 84 demographic, probably the first wave into aged care, assisted aged care. Here's up to 2001. Here is the future. And it's about 2021. You can see a wave coming through. It's a series of rolling waves. Each one of those are different segments. And then, of course, you have acute aged care, aged 85 plus. You can see the numbers over the last 60 years. Here's the numbers over the next 40 years. And it's a movement for the 2030s. You can actually pinpoint this. It's not based on assumptions. You can see the waves coming and, in fact, judge your response accordingly. The key points I want to make is that South Australia is at the forefront of the ageing process, almost like the miner's canary on the Australian continent. But as significant as we think this is in South Australia, there are, in fact, other nations like Japan, Italy, and others where we can actually gain some learnings to apply that into this state. The Australian economy is skewing towards health. 1 in 4 jobs in the 21st century is being created in healthcare and social assistance. This is going to continue, in fact, for generations. I make the point in the Australian today that anyone who is in the workforce, from me right down to the young graduates moving into the workforce at 22, 23, everyone in the workforce today will actually have their entire working career shaped by the ageing process. The baby boomers moved into retirement in 1965, born in 1946, she turned 65 in 1961, and that's going to roll through until the mid-2040s, the 2020s, the 2030s, the 2040s. In fact, this ageing issue is going to dominate this state and this country and other countries for some decades to come. And then finally, of course, we're not alone in this process. There will be learnings to be gained from other states, other localities. The other point I would like to make is the highly localised nature and the very difficult job that, say, local councils would have delivering services in a community like Victor Harbour or Goolwa, where people arrive at a time in life where they demand a lot of services, but they haven't lived in that community to pay the taxes. They've paid the taxes somewhere else. That's fine, we have free movement across the Australian continent, but there needs to be some reconciliation about this around lifestyle, retirement destinations. Yes, the services from the age of 65 and over need to be delivered in Goolwa, but we need a tax transfer system in order to balance it out, to make sure that people who have paid tax in a suburban location can actually draw down on services in a seaside location in retirement. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.